Here's your host, Alex Garrett.
Well, I'm very honored to welcome the Libertarian Party National Chair, Angela McArdle. Angela, thanks for joining me today.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
I jumped on this opportunity when I saw you guys talking about, well, what everybody's talking about, right? What happened this past Tuesday. And libertarians may not like Trump per se, but we do like our rights, don't we, as
Yep.
American citizens? So let's start there. Why were you guys so strong about releasing a statement on this? And it should have come to a surprise that libertarians put aside the maybe differences with Trump and say, hey, what rights are being violated here?
Sure. I mean, we work with people of all different political backgrounds on single issue coalitions. Right now I'm planning a big anti-war, anti-deep state rally for February of next year. We work with people on the left, and it's a really good opportunity to work with people on the right as well, who are suspicious of all of the, obstruction and political attacks on our former president. Libertarians don't want to live in, a dystopian world where the criminal justice system is weaponized against political opposition. That's atrocious.
It is atrocious. And I know that you guys go deeper than just voting rights. You deal with, what do they call them when your sort of personal civil rights are violated as well with the surveillance and whatnot. But have you seen this kind of behavior under the Trump administration? What I mean is, has the Biden administration gotten worse with these kind of tactics, utilizing the DOJ, maybe even utilizing the Colorado court? I mean, are you seeing that as well?
I think so. I think, the Biden administration has gotten worse, but I think it really goes beyond the Biden administration. There's been a push by, progressive activists to take hold of the judiciary for several years now, and district attorneys as well. And they've done a very good job from their perspective of capturing these institutions that are supposed to be extremely impartial. And they've weaponized them against their political opposition. And so I think that's what we're up against. And certainly, they're coming for President Trump right now, but that doesn't mean they're not going to come for other people who disagree with them in the future. We got to be.
I'm worried about, and you might have reached out to him already, because RFK is pretty much independent right now. If you guys reach out to him, for example, someone who's outside of the main and they're really shutting him down, he doesn't even have protection as a presidential candidate. Has the Libertarian Party reach out to him to join and run on their line?
Oh, we've spoken with him quite a bit. And I mean, as the chair of the National Party, I have to be somewhat impartial, but welcoming, when it comes to our presidential candidates. But there have certainly been a lot of members who wanted us to, recruit him and have him join our party. And I've personally had several cordial conversations with him. As of right now, it seems like he's still going to go the independent route. But, we've had talks about ballot access and joint debates and, just sort of helping each other out, because, what we're up against collectively is it's a monolithic state apparatus that has absolute contempt for freedom of choice at the polls, obviously.
Yeah, well, and I know one guy that's speaking out about this is Vivek, and he's been the only one I've seen saying, hey, don't be on the primary if they're not allowing Trump. Pretty admirable. I'm sure you're following how many other candidates may not. Do you see a boycott coming from your personal and from the stance of the Libertarian Party? Do you see a boycott coming of this primary?
A boycott coming against what?
Against the ballot. Do you see others being
I don't know. I mean, I appreciate that Vivek is speaking out against it. I think at a certain point it could, he may change his mind, or it could become like a grandstanding effort. But it is good that he's speaking out. It's really like a prisoner's dilemma. If you put yourself at great disadvantage if you refuse to participate in the political system and you're trying to get elected. But I think there are other creative ways that people can boycott, boycotting debates. That's been an interesting thing that certain members of the GOP have done. You know, President Trump's not engaging in any of them.
Right.
Also committing to, you know, gutting some of these agencies and institutions. That's a take that some Republicans could adopt.
At the core of the Libertarian Party, while I have you, Angela McArdle, you want to break away from both parties, yet sort of have ideas from both of them. So how does that work? If that makes sense, how do you stay independent while embracing both ideals?
I mean, we just, rather than operate within the paradigm of adopting ideas from both major parties, I'd rather say, you know, we're really our own thing. We are very, you know, oriented towards individual rights. We care about property rights. We care about free speech, which I believe, you know, flows naturally from property rights. We care about self-defense and the natural God-given right to bear arms. And we care about economic prosperity and economic freedom. And, you know, there are things that we believe that certainly other parties believe, and, you know, independents believe as well. But libertarians really are our own creatures. You know, we are less incensed and inflamed over immigration. And I know that that's something that conservatives, you know, don't necessarily agree with us on. And certainly there are, you know, issues with the border that are controversial and that could certainly be addressed better. But, you know, we're interested in upward economic mobility, prosperity, and just governing your own life.
Yeah, and this Bidenomics thing, I'm sure you have a lot of thoughts on that as well, because it seems like they keep touting inflation's going down, but we, the American person on the ground, is not seeing it, are we?
I'm not. Is it really though? I mean, it was, you know, they were saying it was 8.5%, 9% last year. Even they had to admit it. And now they're saying it's down to 3.5%. But I haven't seen the prices drop at the grocery store. There's been a little less pain at the gas pump, but it's still high. The dollar purchasing power is just not what it was 2 years ago. And I mean, it doesn't lie, right? The grocery bill doesn't lie. That's where we really feel the pain.
No, it does. And I know that the meme now is about the Kevin McAllister's grocery bill from 20 years ago and what it'd be now. It's kind of insane, isn't it? Let me ask you this. John Fetterman just recently said he doesn't consider himself really Democrat anymore. And are we going to see any of these others disaligning from their party of registration, of where they ran on? Are you going to see more of that? And I guess our invites coming out to those like Joe Manchin and Fetterman to say, hey, if you're not happy with your party, come over here.
I think so. I think that voters want more choice, and things are moving in the direction of independent candidates and minor parties. And that's why you're seeing a lot of other things pop up besides the Libertarian Party. You see this no labels movement. You have the Bobby Kennedy campaign, Cornel West. I don't know whether or not he'll end up being on ballot, but you have a lot of options and choices. And then you have people like Kirsten Sinema going independent. And, you know, I think that people don't want to be beholden onto the game and favors that they owe to major parties when they don't perfectly align with them. And that if candidates and elected politicians feel that they can make that move, I encourage them to do so. So I think it's a really great opportunity. I think it's good.
On that front, you know, it takes a lot to run in a GOP or Democratic Party. I mean, it's ridiculous how much money it is, considering that they want to be inclusive, right? So how does the Libertarian Party stand out from that and say, hey, you're welcome, even if you don't have the funds right now? How does the funding work for Libertarian candidates?
Well, Libertarian candidates, a lot of them have to be self-made, self-starters. They get funding from their state party, the county, occasionally the national party will fund candidates. That's something actually that's been a little bit controversial about my tenure, is that I have pushed really hard for us to pump funding directly just straight into candidates, even if they're at the local level. But, you know, we also have a really tight community. And so we encourage our members and small L libertarians who agree with us, but aren't necessarily card carrying members, to donate to our candidates and support them.
All right. When I hear the Libertarian, I have to say the movie with Johnny Depp was kind of crazy and whatnot with the title, The Libertarian. So Did you watch that movie and all? I don't know. I don't want to get a little
No,
personal,
I have not seen it yet.
but I heard it was kind of wild. And I'm like, I don't think every libertarian's like that. But it's yeah,
John Depp, the Libertarian.
yeah, you got to check that out. Angela, when did you become chair of the party, and when did you actually become part of the Libertarian Party? Because I feel like you have your own story, don't you, to tell?
Sure. I became chair of the party in May of 2022. It was at a national convention that is will forever be known as the Reno Reset, where we had 100%, very aggressive change in national leadership.
Well, how did you become a libertarian, though? I have to ask.
So I became a libertarian really gradually, I think. I was very interested in politics even as a child, and I grew up in a very traditional conservative home. Except I would say that we grew up in a home in the South, but my father was a minister of a church called the Christian and Missionary Alliance, and it had a very strong emphasis on international missions. So one of the ways that I became very politically aware and influenced is that every year we would have a huge international visitation. Missionaries from other countries and people who lived in those other countries would come back to the church and really testify about their experience and share with us what had gone on over there. And my father's advocacy really focused on international relations, and doing outreach where it was illegal to be a Christian in communist countries. So the Soviet Union, Vietnam, China, North Korea. So, I've met people as a child who survived Pol Pot's killing fields, people who had survived the Gulag system, people who'd been tortured in China because they were not members of the state-sanctioned church. And, my family and the people around me developed very strong, healthy distrust of government because of that. We viewed that the religious freedom that we have in the United States is just like paramount to having a free country, and that communism and aggressive government is one of the biggest threats in the world.
It must have been intense to have that exposure, but I'm sure you're grateful for it, because it kind of made you the politico or the person you are today, right?
Absolutely. I mean, I think that was just like a really life-changing experience for me to be 8 and 9 years old and hearing from people who crawled out of Pol Pot's killing fields, were shot, ran across the border, and lived to tell about it. Like this is really heavy stuff. And we moved eventually from Texas, where I grew up, to California, and became a little bit more relaxed culturally. I remember being a teenager and thinking, well, I don't think that it's right for people who smoke weed to go to jail. It just seems kind of stupid. Some of them, it doesn't seem much different than cigarettes or alcohol. Like, what's the distinction? And, I think gay people should probably be allowed to get married. It doesn't have to do anything with the church. I don't understand why we're making a big deal out of it. And someone I was talking to one time, having a political conversation, said, well, you sound more like a libertarian than a conservative. And I thought, well, I've heard of that, and it sounds roughly about right. So maybe that's what I am.
Did your parents share different views, and then you took kind of both of them from each side, or did you just become your own person aside from your mom and dad, or what was their involvement in?
I mean, they've kind of followed along, especially my dad has become, more libertarian over the years.
Okay.
He read some Tom Woods books, and I think those were really eye-opening from him. But he follows the political work that I do, and he's very interested in seeing improvements in the country. He agrees that the war on drugs has failed. He's changed his position on foreign policy. He thinks that what happened after the September 11th attacks was just the wrong way to react, and that never-ending war in the Middle East is just a failure, and we shouldn't be doing it.
Well, and I know that I feel like, because Israel our ally, but I know you've got some thoughts on that as well, I'm sure, about what's going on over there, if you want to touch on it. Speaking of foreign policy, I just feel like the Biden administration has totally botched this whole
Yep.
this war in Israel. It just feels like a botched thing, and I'm obviously for the Israelis, and I think that we should stand with them more. But at the same time, uh, it's okay for the average person to say, okay, we shouldn't be bombing. But for the
Yeah.
president, I don't know. I think he should stand with Israel a little more. You might disagree with that, but
Well, I don't believe we should be giving foreign aid to any country. And I think that Israel would be more incentivized to work things out with their neighbors if they didn't have the aggressive backing of the United States. If we played a little bit more of a passive role. Many Middle Eastern countries have expressed their frustration with the United States being over there in their business. You know, it was viral on TikTok recently. Osama bin Laden's letter back before the September 11th bombings in 2001. And one of the main reasons that he was so upset and declaring jihad on the United States is because of the military involvement of the United States and our backing of Israel with military might. And, you know, what he did was obviously horrendous. You can't go around mass murdering innocent people because you're upset at something the United States military did. And the same thing goes for Hamas. But at a certain point, it would behoove us to stop poking the bear, kind of check ourselves and say, are our actions creating blowback in other countries and costing innocent lives? You know, and that's the approach that I take. You know, certainly the Israeli people have a right to, you know, go after the people who committed those atrocious, you know, murders, rapes, killing innocent people. Like that's awful. But we in the United States shouldn't keep perpetuating this cycle of violence. We should look at the role that we play and check ourselves.
well, I do think, and I mean, I've thought of the Ukrainian war. We should be supporting them, but it just felt like we were giving them aid after aid, and they needed it for a long time, and now that's become a discussion point in Congress. I want to go back to your party, the Libertarian Party, because I feel like you deal with things on a national level, but are you very local as well? Meaning, are you involved with local issues and maybe even funding campaigns to stop, what do they call it? Those ballot measures, if you will, you know, in certain states. Are you involved with that?
I mean, I do a lot of that work from the national level. It's time consuming. It's like a 60-hour a week job, honestly. I'm, in addition to being the chair of the National Party, I function as the CEO, and you know, I jump on this interview immediately out of a staff meeting. But when it comes
Thank
time,
you for that. Thank you.
yeah, absolutely. But when it comes time to get people elected, I do phone banking for candidates. I will door knock and do literature drops if there's a candidate that's close enough to me, you know, in my district. Because I think it's really good to lead by example, and you always need a volunteer. It's good to be connected to.
Absolutely, it is, and I want to ask you about that because I feel like as the national chair, you've got to have a melting pot of sorts, right, from both sides. So how do you keep that melting pot going and growing, while people who are, you know, maybe on different sides do melt together within the Libertarian Party, right? You see that.
Sure. I mean, you find common cause on common issues, right? We do a lot of anti-war advocacy, and we bring in people who are more culturally on the left that way. And, you know, I think that's good because ultimately it's just like, do you believe in the non-aggression principle? Do you want to keep violence out of politics, right? You want to let people decide and make their own way in life, so long as they're not hurting someone else? Do you oppose, you know, United States military violence overseas? And if the answer is yes, then you have a home in the Libertarian Party. Are you all about economic freedom? Do you want economic prosperity and you still have a little bit to learn as far as foreign policy goes? Well, we want to welcome you too. We don't purity test our rank and file membership, right? Because I think that becoming a libertarian is sort of a journey, and it can be a process. I know it was for me. So if people are interested, you know, we want to welcome them and just kind of help them learn more about libertarianism.
Here in New York, we just heard that Mayor Adams might be raising taxes, and that's always fun, right? When you hear that. But
That'll make you into a libertarian really fast.
yeah, it does make you turn libertarian very fast, right?
Yep.
But let me ask you this, Angela: how do states manage this border crisis, which, you know, the average American
Yeah.
didn't create, did we not? how do these states manage it, these cities manage it, and not tax us? Or is this just a big plan to tax us all at this point? Well, what do you think?
Well, I think the first thing we should be aware of is some foreign policy interventionist behavior that has impacted some of these migrant crises. So, recently over the summer, for example, the United States is engaging in regime change in Peru. When we destabilize South and Central American governments and mess up their economies and their whole political world gets turned upside down, we do incentivize large masses of people to come to the United States border. Now, you and I didn't do that, but we should be mindful and try to hold our political administrations accountable when they engage in that sort of behavior, and it needs to become more at the forefront of the average American's mind.
Interesting.
What do we do when they're here, right?
Yeah.
I think we need to have a serious conversation about that. I think that the people who want open borders the most, right? They should be the ones dealing with the migrant crisis. And I don't think that it's reasonable or fair to have a giant influx of people come over the border in a small town and just become homeless and sit on the border. Like, that's just not a good solution.
Is what Texas did this week a violation of rights, if you will, or is this the right move for the local law enforcement to get involved and say, hey, we're not going to let you cross illegally? I think that's a big step that Governor Abbott's taking this week.
I believe in states' rights. Like, we need to let the states decide. It's not a good, this is a very imperfect system, right? Like, it's not ideal, but at this point, like, the state should have a little bit more control over the state borders. If people in Martha's Vineyard, if people in New York City or whoever want to have, hundreds of homeless people from other countries come and camp out, I guess that's their business, but it's completely absurd to just dump a whole bunch of people on the street somewhere. It's not fair to those people either. I don't know.
I see some people in New York, and I've seen the videos. They get off the bus, they look bewildered and not sure where the heck they are.
Like, it's not fair to them. They come over here because probably they've been told to. They're incentivized to come over here. They say, the United States is going to accept you as refugees because of X, Y, and Z. They get bad information, and they're just completely lost. And then what do we turn around and say, psych, we're going to put you on a plane and send you, 3,000 miles back to where the whole thing is just atrocious. I think we probably need to be working with the governments of other countries to figure out what the heck's going on. Can we get an information campaign going there? Is there something that we can do that's short of just pumping money into foreign governments to try to fix this situation?
All right. Well, states' rights. I mean, I think we all believe that, and we believe in our own rights, right? As Americans. Isn't that then? I've been saying this a little bit this week, and maybe people think I'm crazy, but isn't that then? Because the open border, the border policy, invasion of our country is a constitutional conversation, right? So how does that not DQ Biden from the ballot? I mean, I know that it might be extreme to DQ both of them, but there's got to be, if you're going to play it this way, then maybe we should look at the other side too. What do you think?
Well, I mean, I think it is a serious question as to whether or not it's a constitutional violation, because I don't think that the founding fathers included any provision for dealing with illegal immigration in the Constitution or in the Bill of Rights. It's not there, and I think it's ambiguous. I also know that they didn't anticipate dealing with something like this. So, maybe it's a policy question. I don't know how constitutional of an issue it is, but it's certainly a foreign policy question. And I don't think that we approach it that way. I think we only approach it as a domestic policy issue because we're like, oh, it's homeless people. It's an invasion. Like, we need to be figuring out a better solution and involve the countries where these people are coming from.
So I want to go back to the Colorado decision though, because I feel like your antenna went up on this.
Yeah.
So, is that a court appointed? Is that government appointed seats on the Supreme Court, or is it an election that get these people elected to the Supreme Court? How does that work in Colorado?
In Colorado, I believe there are, well, it's both, right? Because people get elected at the local level and then they get appointed, and you
You work your
basically
way up
you
almost.
work your way up the ladder. And so people have to be more mindful. I mean, conservatives and libertarians are so behind the gun on this. Progressives play the long game. They say, you know what, we've got a 10, 20-year, 50-year plan for taking over the state. And conservatives and libertarians are on this sort of like, 2 to 4 year election cycle. And that's just obviously not how politics really work.
So are you, Angela McArdle, telling me right now on this podcast, you're changing the mindset of the Libertarian Party, saying, hey, we got to think ahead too?
Yep, absolutely. You have to adopt what's called a low time preference behavior, where you're not incentivized by the next dopamine hit, right? Like whatever you're seeing on the internet is not, you're not in a constant reactive mode. You're like, this is what I want to accomplish, is my vision for the future. Let's take incremental steps to get there, and let's like stay firm in our resolve to do it.
I think, I don't know if he was part of it, but I think of Larry Sharpe, because here in New York, Larry
Yeah.
Sharpe's a big third party guy and libertarian. I mean, I think he's pretty much a libertarian at this point, right? Have you
He is.
contacted?
He was our gubernatorial candidate in 2018.
Okay, so that's right. He was your candidate. What's the reach like in New York alongside Larry Sharpe?
I think Larry's done a phenomenal job. He's worked really hard. He's also done some issue coalition work and partnered with other people who want ballot access reform. I was actually just on his show last night on the Sharpe Way. Yeah, he's a great guy.
Well, I met him. He's very fiery about New York State and reforming politics. And in fact, Frank Morano, who I'm sure you know, got me into the New York State Reform Party years ago. And so it's sort of like a small circle of those who want reform. And on that note, speaking of primaries, are you connected with open primaries? Because that's another big discussion going on, is whether we should keep these primaries open for everybody, not just Republicans and Democrats.
I think that parties need to have, well, I believe that we need to have party primaries. Whether or not they're open or closed is, a conversation of nuance, but I do not believe that top 2 and top 3 primaries are the way to go. It's way too easy to rig it. They have that in California. It's called a jungle primary, and it's just a contest between the top 2 Democrats. That's it. They dominate the ballot.
I also don't think it's fair that when you're going to maybe register for a party, they make that big deal, register today, enroll today, but they don't include the Libertarian Party. They just say independent. So how do we get libertarian, the name libertarian, on those registrations?
Well, and if you register in many other states, it is there, but New York, Larry Sharpe worked really hard in 2018. He met the threshold to gain ballot access for the Libertarian Party in the state of New York, raised the threshold and the signature gathering requirement, and made it completely absurd. You've got to collect 45,000 signatures in a 6-week period now. It's unprecedented. Diane Sarah is the only person who did it when she was running for Senate against.
And that change happened in that election cycle, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I mean, he did it in 2018, and then right after that, immediately the legislature changed it. So that's what it takes. If you're in another state, you might be able to register as a libertarian right away. Some states, by the way, don't have party registration at all, like the state of Texas. But yeah, New York, it's just going to take a concerted effort. So get in touch with the New York Libertarian Party, especially come March, April, and May. That's when their signature gathering is going to start taking place.
I was going to say, are you guys starting to think of 2020? I mean, you're obviously thinking of it. Any candidate where we could be surprised about or look forward to?
Very much working on it right now. And the National Party will choose their presidential candidate at the end of May. And hopefully our presidential candidates are going to step up and start helping us with ballot access in a couple of key states, because we have to get on the hamster wheel and reseek it every couple of years, and that's fairly normal. New York is the only one that's a really difficult hurdle.
Here you are, a national chairwoman of the Libertarian Party, and yet we don't get access to the other chairs of the different parties. Why is that? And is the accessibility you guys have to literally talking to you right now what makes you unique within this political sphere we're in?
I don't know that other that past Libertarian Party chairs have actually been as accessible as I have been. Certainly some at a certain point, but I'm probably one of the more accessible ones because I want the party to be accessible, right? Like I don't want to be perceived as stuck up. I want us to develop a really good relationship with grassroots. I think that that's where our strength is, and so I just want to cultivate that. Ronna McDaniel and whoever the DNC chair is right now, they don't feel the same way about grassroots. The GOP kind of has contempt for their grassroots and their local elected officials, and I just don't think that's the way to go. I think that's one of the reasons that they lose.
I gotta ask you this with this accessibility. I love accessibility because I just feel like every party needs that. And with those grassroots efforts, I want to get to the anti-war thing real fast. When you say anti-war, I kind of go back to like the 60s anti-war, the flag burning. I mean, is it a sort of modernized love of country, yet why are we getting into war? Or is it a mix? Like, what's the anti-war effort like for you guys compared to maybe how it was in the 60s?
Sure. Well, I mean, I don't think we're going to be burning any flags, but we bring people together from all different backgrounds. We bring together people who are diehard anti-war, progressive activists. We bring people together who are so far left that they're practically communists. You've got libertarians, you've got many different types of libertarians, politically independents, people who are conservative. We had Ron Paul at our last rally.
Right.
We're hoping that he joins us again. You have people come from all different walks of life, and that's what makes the anti-war movement that we're trying to cultivate so special. It's a left-right coalition. We don't have to agree on economics. We don't have to agree on everything. There's no economic theory in nuclear winter, right? Like, I view nuclear war and the, global catastrophic disagreements as an existential threat. And so do these other people. And so we set aside our differences and we come together and, in another way, it's a fascinating paradox that something as terrifying as nuclear war actually brings us so much closer together. And we really see the humanity in each other.
Are we on the doorstep of World War III? I have to ask you this now that we're talking.
I mean, maybe. I feel like the Ukraine-Russia war is being walked back now, and it's lost support in the United States government, which is really good. But, my concern is that the hubris of our political elites is going to enable them to continue NATO's encroachment on the Russian border, stoking more animosity and suspicion and fear over there, and understandably so. And that pushes us closer and closer to war, and that what the United States is enabling to happen in Palestine right now through the Israeli government is really angering a lot of countries and people in other places in the world. And I think that we need to engage in peaceful foreign policy and good diplomacy. That's what keeps us away from war. And we're not doing that right now, unfortunately.
We're not. Well, this has been really insightful, and I feel like right now with these wars, we're dealing with messaging versus messaging. So how does the libertarians' messaging differ from the mainstream and the establishment, if you will?
I mean, we want peace, right? We want the United States to be the peacemaker. If we've got to have any role in international conflicts, we want it to be that we're bringing people together, helping them come to the table. We want peaceful foreign policy. We want free trade, entangling alliances with none. The famous phrase is when goods don't cross borders, troops will. So we want to be the peacemaker.
And one last thing, I saw a stat that says we are in New York, because you deal with economics also, the second most state with small businesses here in New York. And I figure, hey, why are we just celebrating Small Business Saturday? So have you aligned yourself with the small business industry, if you will, like those who run the small business, and say, hey, jump in with us. We got your back. Like, what do you, is there a connection there?
Yeah, absolutely. We did a lot of small business outreach during lockdowns, trying to support small businesses and telling them, we don't agree with what's happened to you. We think you should be able to stay open. Small businesses and entrepreneurs are very busy people. They do not often get super involved in politics until it becomes mission critical, and they must do so. They're usually very busy operating, their day-to-day goings on. But to the extent that they're willing to jump in and get politically active, we do outreach to them, and we love to have them. We want lower taxes for them, less regulatory barriers, and we just want them to be able to do business and support their families. We believe in the entrepreneurial spirit.
Angela McArdle, this has been a real honor to talk to you today, and thank you for joining this little podcast here in New York. This is great, and I hope this conversation maybe change people's mind, maybe bring people to the party, and I might join it myself one day. We gotta follow up on that because I'm independent as independent can be, but I feel like we can connect on certain levels, So,
Yeah, absolutely.
and how do people join? Just so I know, and so people know.
Absolutely. If you're interested in joining the Libertarian Party, you can go to lp.org, scroll to the bottom, and you'll see a spot for join. If you're interested in attending our rally and finding out more about what we're like, meeting some of our anti-war allies, you can go to defeatthedeepstate.org. We are fundraising right now to get that rally off the ground. That's going to be on February 17th in Washington, D.C., and we usually organize buses and transportation from New York City.
All right. Well, maybe that any disabled in the party as well, people with disabilities.
Do we have disabled people in the party? Certainly.
You do. Good. Well, then, because I connect with them. I rollerblade on one leg in New York, and I work on adaptability here in New York, and I just feel like I get where you're coming from. So I'd love to stay in touch and have you back on and see where this connection can grow.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. This has been Angela McArdle, the chairperson of the Libertarian National Party. Thanks so much.
Thank you.